Hello, and welcome to Powerful Healing Modalities Day 8. This is our very last day. I'm thrilled to welcome body language expert Lavinia Plonka. Lavinia has been a somatic healer and teacher for over 40 years and was a movement consultant for theater and television companies around the world. She taught the Feldenkrais method, the ELBA method, and she is an emotional body instructor. Lavinia is a faculty member of the Shift Network, and her training and professional career has included theater, dance, yoga, and martial arts. She authored several books and audio programs. She's the director of Asheville Movement Center in North Carolina, and she pioneered KNISA, a movement learning process that utilizes ancient traditions and modern science. So welcome, Lavinia, and thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, and you have such a beautiful background. That must be where you do your sessions. It's really pretty.
Yeah, this is my studio. This is the Asheville Movement Center, actually. So my students get to enjoy this environment all the time.
Yeah, it looks awesome. So I'm actually gonna jump right in and ask you how you developed Kanisa. I'm sure, it probably stemmed from all your other training, but I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, well, it took a lifetime. I mean, here I am. I'm in my 70s and I finally figured out what I want to do, right? It's the story of our lives, isn't it? So I spent about 35 years being a kind of cheerleader for the Feldenkrais method. And I'll be happy to talk to you more about the Feldenkrais method itself. But briefly, it's a brilliant way of using movement to direct your attention to be able to improve the functioning of your life. But I also had like this parallel life of being fascinated with ancient traditions that looked at movement, everything from, traditional Indian dance to Sufi dance to different prayer modalities. And then meanwhile, neuroscience is coming in with all of this information about how the brain processes movement and how we all kind of express ourselves universally the same way. And so I'm doing all of this kind of research around the fact that I'm teaching this movement modality. And I found that I was creating workshops that were not pure Feldenkrais. They were explorations of how some of these traditions intersect with each other. They were looking at how science and religion are coming together, or science and spirituality, you could say. And I started to feel like, well, the envelope is getting too tight for me. I need to blossom out. And of course, there was the creative side of myself that had spent 25 years in the theater that needed to feel full expression. So through that process, I began to start to see that I needed to name it. I couldn't just
And
be, well, it's a little bit of Feldenkrais and a little bit of Alba and a little bit of research and a little bit of science. I had to name it. And Kanisa for me is a word, it's a made up word that combines the idea of kinesthetics, which has to do with movement and the body, E for emotion, S for sensation, and A for attention. So I pulled that together for myself. And it's like, you could call it anything you want, but I just put that name on it so that I have a bigger envelope to play in, or a bigger playpen to play in as I share my continuing study. Because for me, and I'm sure you feel the same way, I mean, I teach in order to learn. When I work with people, it's not like I've got all this knowledge and I'm sharing it. It's like I'm hungry to find out how other people are taking this and how they can run with it. That to me is the exciting part. So that's the short story of Kanisa. It's
I love it. And I like the name you came up with it.
Well,
It's
thank you.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, if you had seen the like 40 pages of names you know, you do all these names, you're doing all these names, then you do all these name searches, and then you spend money finding out that somebody else already has that name. And, you know, you keep on going and keep on going until you finally get it. It took a long time. So I think the first time I started trying to think of a name was back in like 2018. And so, and I didn't teach my first Kinesia training until last year. So you get a sense of how long it takes to put something like that together.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it. I'm a writer. It takes me forever just to think of a title. I've like finished books, and I'm like, what should the title be? And it usually comes to me in the shower or something. It's like,
Right. But that's a
well,
perfect example of the creative process, right?
it is.
It doesn't come when you're kind of beating your head against the wall. It happens in the shower or in the bathtub, in the famous Eureka, right?
When you release control over it and your unconscious then takes over.
Right.
And you were saying about wanting bigger expression, like you taught Feldenkrais and other things, and how you needed a bigger envelope. I just think that's how a lot of things evolve, that people are very involved in something that makes them happy that someone else created. And then, their experiences, can make something a little bit different and a little bit larger and suit them. I mean, that's how things evolve. That's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So what is Feldenkrais for people who don't know?
So first of all, it's not a religion. A lot of
Okay.
times, you know, when I first graduated from my Feldenkrais training and I tried to get jobs in like adult education and things like that, and I came to this one school to have a meeting with the head of adult education, and I had presented that I wanted to teach Feldenkrais, and he like looked down and he said, "Well, we don't allow religious instruction here." And I said, "Oh no, it's not Feldenkrais, it's Feldenkrais." So Moshe Feldenkrais
Mhm.
was he was an engineer, he was a nuclear physicist, he was a Renaissance man who developed a way of using movement for learning. He always used to say, I don't teach movement, I teach learning, but learning through movement, through using the body. And the work is designed to, you know, use these very small, subtle, sophisticated movements to help bring your attention to where you have habits that are interfering with the joy of your life. So, you know, if you have a shoulder pain or you have a hip issue, you can't live your life the way you'd like to live your life. And using these beautiful small movements, you can begin to kind of unlock, untangle, become aware of how you're holding so that you can go forth and do what you want to do. He always used to say, if you know what you're doing, you can do what you want. But so many of us have developed habits. I mean, look, we need habits. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have any habits. Everything that we do is habitual. But there are some habits that have become what he called parasitic, where they were useful at one point in our lives and now are just getting in our way. And so it's about becoming aware of those parasitic habits that are keeping us from living the life we want using movement instead of thinking, talking, analyzing. It's like it's all in your body. I often say to people, how you move is how you move through life. So if I'm moving through life in pain, I'm not having a full, happy lifestyle. If you know, I mean, obviously there are things sometimes that happen to us that are beyond our control, but I'm talking about the kind of pain that is the result of habitual behavior. So that's the short answer. And I can certainly give you an experience of some of that movement if you want. But, you know, he developed like over 1,000 movement sequences
Oh
that
my God.
I know it's pretty amazing. I mean, I haven't even gone through all of them because they really are incredible. And, you know, and it works both ways. It works where we have group classes, which people come to the Nashville Movement Center for classes, or you can, you know, they can be taught online because what's so beautiful is that, and what's so unique about it is that there's no demonstration. There's no modeling. There's no, you should do it this way. The lessons are done strictly through verbal instructions. So you're following along based on your understanding, your ability, your curiosity. A lot of it is done lying down. There's no demand for you to get it right. And so that process takes away half of the stress that people feel when they're trying to kind of reprogram their brains. It's really beautiful. And then there's also a hands-on component to it. Kinesa, however, is all based on language. It's all based on talk, giving the instructions for the movement, looking at how we use language for learning. So I took that aspect of Moshe's teaching and integrated it with my own research.
Well, yeah, I mean, that sounds different than yoga, where in yoga, they'll come over and move you into the correct position, which is often painful.
Well,
You know,
it's a different paradigm. It's a different way of learning. And again, Feldenkrais said it's not about doing the movement well, it's about paying attention to how you're doing the movement. So it's a completely different way of looking at using the movement. It's not like you're trying to get it right, get the right pose or whatever. And don't get me wrong, I love yoga. I practice yoga, I do Pilates, I dance, and dance is very much a discipline of do it this way. But when I lie down on the floor and I'm being given the luxury and the spaciousness to just feel my shoulder or sense my breath, it's a completely different experience. When there's not anybody there telling me, no, this is how you should move your shoulder. It's just like you're exploring based on the instructions, so that the stress is taken away from you, the judgment is taken away. Sometimes we call our work an act of self-politeness or self-compassion, right? It's just this idea that I'm just checking in and seeing how I am. So that's Feldenkrais.
well, and so you said Kaneza obviously is modeled after this because you taught Feldenkrais for like 40 years, you said? 40?
Well, I taught I've been teaching, and I still teach Feldenkrais because it's very much a part of who I am. But yeah, I've been teaching that for about 30 something years, 30 something. I lost track.
I mean, you look really great. You don't look your age. But so obviously, movement really helps too. I think
It
it's
does.
probably a lot anti-aging. So I should be doing more of that. But you talked about
I want to say something about the word should.
well, I
No
should move
shoulds.
more. I mean, honestly, I should. I don't move enough. That I know that. So
Yes, well, Feldenkrais always used to say should means don't want to.
I'm kind of
So,
lazy.
so the idea that yeah, is it, or is it that you haven't found the movement that gives you joy?
Hey, I do some yoga, my problem is I don't like to sweat and I have a heart valve thing. So I don't like to, I can't do things that make your heart rate go up, so
Right.
that has limited me, but still it feels good once you've done movement exercises. I mean, I always feel better when I go for a walk or when I do yoga. I just don't
Mhm.
do anything that, gets my heart rate up. But you were talking about Kanisa and how you created this broader envelope, and you talked about dancing. So if you're laying on the floor a lot of that time, how do you incorporate like elements of dance that you talked about?
So I don't incorporate elements of dance while I'm lying on the floor, but the movements that I do lying on the floor can improve my dancing, right?
Oh,
So for example, um, if well, there's a lot of different ways that you can approach it, but for example, if I was a dancer and I wanted to improve my balance, instead of standing there and trying to stand on one leg to improve my balance, you could spend some time lying on the floor and exploring, well, what's happening in my pelvis and how my pelvis responds to the invitation to move through my spine. and how do I shift my weight over to the left, and how do I shift my weight over to the right, and how can I move in order to integrate that? And then I get back up again and I try to balance, and the balance has improved.
Wow.
So you don't have to dance to improve your dancing. And that process is, well, it's used a lot in universities and dance studios, actually, in the exact same way that I just described it, where the dancers, try a combination, a dance combination, and then they lie down on the floor for an hour and do a series of movements that are based on the Feldenkrais method. And then they get back up again and they dance, and they're like, wow, that was a lot easier. I mean, because I was originally in as a mime and as a dancer, and there was a transition period in my life where I was studying Feldenkrais, but I was still making my living as a performer. And I actually performed better with less warm up and less pain, even though I was older by that point, because I was already in my 40s by that point, than when I was younger in my late 20s and 30s. And I would have all these aching back pains after a performance. It was fascinating to me that less effort and more attention actually improved my performance, even though at that point I was aging out of that profession. So it's really fascinating to me.
Makes me feel hopeful, actually that I could do this and fix little things because I'm sure unconsciously, we hold certain muscle groups tighter and it constricts the way we move and walk. I mean, if paying attention to something and having these micro movements or whatever, I'm sure is really revelatory.
It's
So
really revelatory, and you don't sweat. So,
thank you because I don't like it. So when you created Kanisa, you did say you incorporated some ancient traditions too, or no? Did I misunderstand?
no, you didn't misunderstand. Um, so Kanisa, the way I developed Kanisa, has like a kind of a sevenfold process to it. It's just interesting because I was just reading an article about the number seven and the significance of seven in itself. It's got like so much power in our lives, in our cultures, in our literature, everywhere. So the Kanisa process explores the self through what I call the seven bodies. So we've got the obvious, the physical, the mental, the emotional, the creative body. So the physical, mental, and emotional to me are like the sort of ordinary aspects of our functioning. Then we get into the creative body, this idea that I am a creator. I'm constantly creating my reality. I'm constantly creating what is happening around me. And I also have the power to be able to create art or, expression. So that's the creative body. But then we start to get into the other realms. So we have the archetypal body. And in Kanisa, we explore 4 archetypes for what I consider to be like the touchstones or the pillars of archetypal energies. Now we know that, from many traditions, there's a gazillion archetypes that you can
I was going
have.
to say, the
You
what
know?
for are
So
you?
the four are the warrior, the teacher, the healer, and the visionary. And for me, each of those is reflected in a part of myself, right? That the warrior, I can't sit anymore. I have to show you, okay?
Okay.
So no, because after a while, sitting, so the warrior is the grounded pelvis, legs, the ability to be able to move in any direction, to be able to retreat at a moment's notice, to be able to hold myself in place. So the warrior archetype is centered in the pelvis. The teacher archetype is centered in the chest area because that's where my lungs are. So as I teach, as I listen, I'm taking in, I'm giving, my heart is open to my student or receiving, and of course all of these have a shadow, et cetera, but I'm just giving you the sort of the Cliff Notes version of it. And the healer, of course, is the hands. And so how my hands conduct energy, how my hands move, how I use my hands to help others, as I mean, I work with people one-on-one through touch as well, but just the idea that just bringing my hands near someone or being aware of my hands is the healer. And then of course the visionary is the eyes and how I use my eyes to see. So and to not see, to be blind, right? Again, there's the two sides for all of those. So the archetypal body is one of the bodies, that's the fifth body. And the sixth body is your energy body, which is very much aligned with the chakra system.
Okay.
And it's interesting because the chakra system, of course, also involves these parts of ourselves, right? So we
Yes.
integrate as we go along. You know, it's like you're working with the energy, but you also realize, oh, I'm working with the energy of the fifth chakra, but that's also coming from the teacher being able to express itself. So they kind of intertwine with each other. And then the last body, oh, and also the in the Chinese tradition, right? There's three dantians that are also very much aligned with the seven chakras and are going back to the physical body, all the way back to the physical body. The seven chakras also are aligned with these various neural plexuses that are in our nervous system that are, you know, they're right there. If you just look at the anatomy just of the nerves, those plexuses connect up with the energy centers and with the dantians. So we've got all of that happening in ourselves, and it's ignored in a lot of traditions how everything kind of goes together. So that's bringing the science with the ancient traditions. And then the last body is what I call the alchemical body. And
Okay.
that's really where I'm connecting with my relationship to my sense of spirit, my ability to work with transformation and cosmic laws. So that brings us back to like the law of three and the law of seven and the Enneagram and all these other ways that traditions have looked at the process of transformation, because that's what alchemy is, right? Turning lead
Exactly.
into gold is not about putting some stuff in the fire. It's transforming my inner lead into the gold of something that is my potential. So we use those seven bodies to integrate this idea of ancient traditions, modern science, and movement together. And so the workshops and the trainings all look at those seven bodies and then how we can use that relationship to the seven bodies, incorporating the various principles of Kinesa. So that was my little, sorry,
I love it.
I
I
couldn't
loved
sit
it.
and
I'm
do
finding
that.
it fascinating. Well, and some of the stuff I haven't heard, well, I haven't heard the term alchemical body, and what you explained made sense. I mean, this is a very synergistic practice. You're taking a lot of things and blending them together and seeing everything more as a whole instead of just parts, which,
That's right. And
yeah.
it's interesting that you use the word, I use the word synergy a lot, you know, and then the course that I'm just finishing up teaching for the Shift Network, they called it somatic synergy, which I love. I just
Oh,
love
yeah.
that idea of a
Yeah.
somatic synergy.
And so movement really is a healing practice then. I mean, movement can be a healing practice on a lot of levels.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, like, I know since you're there in your workshop, I don't know if you want to do this again, but is there any way you can show us, like, just like for a minute, what a Kaneza kind of practice or exercise looks like? Um, like, what one of these movements looks like?
Um, I wouldn't want to say that I would want you to see what it looks like. I would rather that you experience it with me. Would
Oh,
you?
okay.
I mean, I
Okay.
wouldn't make you do something lying on the floor.
I
I
can't
would,
get on the floor right now. No,
I
there's not
know.
enough
It's like,
for that.
no,
But
not in the office. No, no, but we could do something. Just trying to think of which one would be the best for this particular experience.
Can I do it while I'm sitting, or do I need to
Of
stand?
course. No. We'll do one that you're
Okay,
sitting
all
so
right.
that you don't have to move. But well, tell me a little bit about something that you wish you could improve in your life or feel better in your life, physically, mentally, emotionally, it doesn't matter what it is, so that I can have a point of reference for you that might be reflected in your audience as well.
Something emotionally, not necessarily physically.
It can be whatever it is, whatever you want.
Okay. Boy, that's vulnerable. So I'm
Well, no,
thinking,
I don't want to put you on the spot. You could
no,
just
you
say,
know
oh,
what? No, do it.
my neck
That's
is
fine.
always sore.
We'll go there. I very much love people. I love talking to people. I feel like people feel, that they can talk to me easily. Strangers talk to me all the time. And yet I can have times where I'm very guarded. I feel like my heart chakra can be very guarded, and I don't like that. I don't know how to fix it. So is this something that you can fix in Kanisa?
Um, well, first of all,
Did I give you too hard of a thing?
we never talk about fixing something, but
Okay.
but the idea of opening the heart
Yeah.
is a wonderful idea, and there's like many different things that we can do to approach that, to explore that. There's I'm going to back up just a hair so that you can see more of me, but there's an interesting, and this actually comes from the Feldenkrais method. So I want to give credit where credit is due, but
Okay.
we use it a lot when we're looking at it from an alchemical perspective, this possibility of transformation, and it's super simple. It has to do with how I use the energy of my hand, the healer archetype, and direct that to what I need for myself.
Oh,
So, are you right-handed or left-handed?
I am right-handed.
Okay, so you'll be using your right hand. And so, and you don't have to have your hand on camera as we're doing this. I'm just doing it so that others can see it and try it. But you just, with your hand, could you just very slowly bring your fingers to touch your thumb, just ever so lightly. And then when you've touched, can you just let them unfold again in this very delicate fashion, right? So you're just being really soft, kind of folding and unfolding. Right now, this movement is, every part of you has the potential for going into flexion and extension, right? All of our emotions are either, and if you want to just take a pause for a moment, I can go into flexion as a fear reaction, or I can go into flexion as a receptive compassion reaction. I can go into extension to open up to the stars and the sun and the moon, or I can go into extension to be aggressive and cruel, right? But flexion and extension is here. Flexion and extension of my elbows, flexion and extension of my face. It's all happening all the time. So when I do this movement, if you think about how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? So how I allow that pulsing of flexion and extension to happen in my hand begins to communicate through my entire nervous system. At the same time, as you go slowly and you quiet yourself down, you can almost feel, and I know that you're an acupuncturist, so you have a sense of the energy that's in the hand, how it builds, right? So as I'm here, I kind of feel this building of a quality in my hand. Then I sync it with my breathing. And as I tune into this movement and my breath, I bring this beautiful folding and unfolding to the part of me that needs the most assistance. So in your case, you would hover over the heart, as if you were irradiating or illuminating your heart center. Sensing your breath, sensing the relationship. You could hover. You might find that your hand wants to move. It might even want to move to your throat chakra so that as you explore, you can feel that pulsing. Allowing that to connect with your nervous system as if you were shining the light of attention on your own potential. And then you just let it go.
Oh my gosh, that was weirdly powerful.
It's weirdly
I
powerful.
Yeah, I felt just like when I do qigong, it activates energy in my hands. And the minute I started doing this, I could feel the energy.
Mm-hmm.
And right before you said you might want to move your hand, my hand did want to go naturally to my throat.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I
right
was just
before you.
following mine at the same time. So, people have used this to irradiate and energize around a physical pain, or an emotional situation. I actually use this a lot when I'm nervous. Like
Really?
right before I go on stage for a presentation, or like, when I do these big classes and it's the first time I'm doing it, I'm there pulsing away, because it kind of brings me back to a place of centeredness. So that was basically a Kanisa version of a Feldenkrais movement, taking this idea of energy in another direction. And I mean, I got a million of them, but that's
I
that's
bet you do. It reminded me a little of a sea anemone, a sea
Oh my
anemone. Do
gosh,
you
that's
say
so
that right?
true. Sometimes I use that as the metaphor to imagine that
Oh, do
feeling.
you?
Yes,
Because it's so
absolutely.
peaceful to watch them,
Mhm.
when they're flowing underwater. And
Mhm.
yeah,
And the
I hope I
feeling
said
of
that right.
water, the water itself has that, and we're mostly water.
Yeah, of course,
So
70% or something.
as we feel that pulsing, then we can feel that whole softening through the rest of ourselves. You
Yeah.
mentioned earlier this idea of the kind of habitual tensions that we hold in ourselves. And we
Mhm.
all have places where we hold. And once we become aware of them, then and that area opens up, there's a lot more freedom and a lot more energy, because it takes a lot of energy to hold yourself in tension. And we don't even realize that we're doing it, you know?
Yeah, I agree. Do you find that when people are doing Kinesia that emotions come to the surface? Because I was doing my little sea anemone thing, and I actually felt like I was getting teary.
Hmm.
It
Sure.
does something that happens.
Sometimes people get teary, sometimes they get giddy, sometimes, sometimes they fall asleep, you know.
Really? While they're moving?
Yeah. Well, obviously it's not during the moving part. Although sometimes people are moving and then after the class is over, they go, I think I fell asleep. And I'll be like, well, you were moving the whole time. So it shuts off that thinking part of your brain sometimes, and it brings you into a different state for sure.
Oh,
But yeah,
wow,
sometimes
that's
people feel,
incredible.
as something gets released or as something gets accessed, there will be sometimes emotions for people. We get touched. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I loved that. I loved that simple little exercise, but it felt really profound. So thank you for that. Um, Now I know you're against should, I get it. Um, but if somebody wanted to have a regular practice, I mean, what do you suggest? I mean, I imagine it's very individual, and you teach, so you probably do this every day. But I mean, the average person out there who wants to, um, evoke a lot of, change, even subtle change in their life, like how long would a practice take, or should it not should? would it be beneficial to do it like every day, or do you take breaks in between?
Well, again, it depends on the person. It depends completely on what you want. I never give people like, this is what you should do. It's not like physical therapy where you get a program and you follow it, and the reason is that we all have our issues and our compulsions. So if I said to one person, well, you should do this 3 times a week, and the person is a kind of person who is a good girl and wants to do it right, and she would do her 3 times a week. And then another person would forget that they were supposed to do it and they feel guilty. Or another
Okay.
person would be like, well, I don't like being told what to do, and they wouldn't do it at all. Or my favorite is, they'd come in and I'd say, so did you get a chance to do the exercise? And they'll be like, what exercise? Right. So each of us has our own way of arousing our curiosity and our interest.
Mm.
And so my job is actually to make people feel curious enough or interested enough that they create their own program, their own interest, their own possibilities. I can make suggestions. I'll say, hey, I'm going to send you this audio. Try it and see how you feel. And, if you feel like it, do it a couple times before you see me again. But it's all phrased in ways that give them choice. Choice is one of the principles of Kinesa, that you have agency, that you have autonomy, and you make the decision as to what is important for you. And as you continue with this, you start to realize, oh, well, this has become a priority for me. This is important. And by the way, when I'm teaching, I'm not doing it, right?
Oh, you're talking, you're
I am
directing, yeah.
talking and I am watching everyone to make sure that what I'm saying is understood. Because if somebody's doing the movement differently, then I have to find a way to rephrase my language so that everyone can understand without me going, yo, Bridget, it's not the right shoulder, it's the left shoulder. It's how do you find the way to do that? So I'm following them with my attention. And when I'm going to do the movement, I'm going to do the movement at home or after class. And I do it because if I don't do it, I am not the person I want to be. I get clicky, I get stiff, when I give myself permission to lie down, I feel better, I feel clearer, my creative blocks are freer. So to me, it's like, oh boy, Lavinia, it's time for you to lie down right now. Get down there on the floor. And and then I do the movement, but I don't do it while I'm teaching.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
As
And I'm
tempting as it
guessing,
is.
as tempting as it would be, yeah, probably to join them. But so I'm thinking then the movements are going to be, what's called for in that moment. So there must not be like a set time to do movements. It's just intuitive.
You
Like
mean,
you wouldn't say 30 minutes, like I'm going to do this for 30 minutes. You just kind of do it until you feel like you're done.
right. So there are longer lessons, like they can go for like 45 minutes. You could spend 45 minutes on the floor exploring your shoulder if you want to.
Okay.
I have, and many of my colleagues also have found that a lot of people don't have 45 minutes, especially in the beginning when you're not sure how you feel about this practice. So I always say to people, do as much of the lesson as you want. I've also created a few shorter versions of things. Sometimes you could just do a part of a lesson. Again, it's not so much the movement, it's the attention that you're paying to yourself as you're doing the movement. That's really what is evoking the change and the improvement, right? So, I mean, there are people who come to class who can't do all the movements. And so they just imagine the movements and they're still getting something out of it because the brain interprets intention as action, right? Imagination
Exactly.
is as powerful as the movement. And so that's how many people can work towards rehabilitation. So if you just spend 10 minutes with yourself, it's going to be a better day. And then you start to become more interested and you go, oh man, what happened if I did 20 minutes? Right. So it's kind of like one of my teachers, one of my trainers once said that Feldenkrais and therefore Kinesia as well. But it's kind of like walking in a mist, right? If you open the door and you went outside and it's pouring rain, you just go right back in. But if you go outside, it's like, oh, it's a little misty. And you walk for an hour and you realize I'm soaking wet, but you didn't realize what was kind of penetrating you. So that's the way I feel about these movement processes. It's just like go outside go into it for a little while and then see what happens. So many
That was a
times
good,
after a
that's a good
class,
analogy. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so many times after a class, people sit up and they go, "What? It's over? It's over? We just laid
Wow, they're
down."
really into it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's because you enter another dimension. You're really not in a time zone anymore. You're just with your experience.
Oh, I want that. That sounds heavenly.
It is heavenly. Well, you'll have to come to a class.
I'm in Illinois, so
Well, there's tons of
I
teachers in
can't
Illinois.
actually. Yes, ma'am. But I like you. I'd want you. Maybe
Well,
maybe if
I've
I
got tons of recordings online.
that's good to know. Do you find yourself still constantly like innovating your Kinesia practice and adding things to it? Do you intuitively feel like you need to add something new sometimes? It's not like a rigid practice that you don't innovate any longer. Is
Oh
that
my
right?
God. That's you could say that's my problem, is that
It's not a problem.
I love the creative process so
Yeah,
much. It's always
yeah,
like, well, how can I do this better? How can I do this differently? How can I do this in another way? How can I integrate that idea, or I'll learn something and it'll be like, oh, that's exactly like that movement and oh, that would work really well together. So no, I'm always thinking about how all of these because we live in such an amazing universe. It's just like
yeah.
I mean, it's just endless unfolding as far as I'm concerned. So no, I don't even know what it would mean to do the same thing all the time.
Yeah, I'm like you, so I agree. I totally know what you're talking about because I'm just like that. So I love that.
Yeah.
Um,
Now I have structure. Like
uh-huh.
like for example, there are sequences of lessons that are structure, but then within that structure, that frame, just like in your work, there's certain points, but then how you organize yourself around the points that you're working with this particular person is your creative process, right? It's the same thing.
Yeah, I don't practice acupuncture anymore, but when I
Oh,
did it, yes, it was always an intuitive. I mean, of course, I was trained, and I worked on tons and tons of people, so there were certain like recipes of which points you would put needles in.
mm-hmm.
But there were times where I would be inspired to do something different, and often that was the key to healing it. So you do have to trust your intuition with things, I think.
Right, exactly. So intuition and creativity to me are very related, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Because you're
I think
tapping
so.
you're tapping into again that source. So sort of knowing how to be spontaneous without being chaotic. To me, that's a fine line, right?
Yes, I agree. And yeah, chaotic. Yeah, you don't necessarily want that. But yeah, being able to create and move with the flow. If I get inspiration, that I go with it because I figure it came to me for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So I love how you do that. And so I'm guessing, some of your clients or you have had some kind of interesting and amazing breakthroughs. Do you have any like stories you'd be willing to share about how this kind of practice changed you or changed some of your clients in a certain way?
Well, I think I've pretty much talked about me.
Well, I love hearing your
I mean,
stories. So
I mean,
Still talking
yeah,
to you.
but I mean, before I discovered Feldenkrais and
Mhm.
all of this work, I mean, I was very hyper, very tense, very I had a lot of, trauma in my childhood. And so my life was, and I had a lot of pain. A lot,
No.
I had a chronic back pain. So this work has completely transformed who I am and how I live my life. So, I like to think of myself as the poster child. I am my own poster child. But in terms of experiences that I've had with people, oh my gosh, I'm trying to think of a good story. It's always hard because I feel like I'm in some way I want to honor the confidentiality of the people that I work with.
Right.
Um,
I mean, don't tell us any names
oh,
or
I'm not going to
identify.
tell you any names for sure. I'm not going to tell
But
you any names.
but I mean, like maybe you can create an amalgam of like similar issues that people have had where there was a breakthrough.
Oh,
That's
I
what
could
people do in fiction when they write, you know.
make stuff up. No, here, I'll give you an example. Okay. Of a client who had gone to, I don't know, physical therapists, chiropractors, just every practitioner in the world
Hmm.
for what was diagnosed as a frozen shoulder, which is very common, right? Frozen shoulder is very common. And when we started working together, we started with the physical. This idea of, well, what can move? What does move? What is allowed? How does the other side move? Can the other side inform the side that's less functional? So we worked from the physical first. As this person became clearer about the different holding patterns that were
Hmm.
involved, she started to talk about her her work, which happened to be, actually, it was her right shoulder. She spent a lot of time on the computer. There was a lot of
Right.
time with the mouse. There was a lot of time leaning forward. It was a stressful job. And so as she was talking, like, you could feel this kind of anger coming up. And she could feel the anger
Right.
coming up. And she's like, oh my God. And at one point she went, my shoulder's angry. And I was like, okay, now we don't have to like tell stories about it. We don't have to, get into a whole thing. But again, through her work of understanding what was happening with the computer, um, we played with, again, the physical. I said, well, why don't you switch the mouse to your other hand? And then the next time she came in and I said, how'd that go for you? And she said, it was terrible. She said, I put the mouse over on that side, and every single time I got angry, I would go over to this side. So now I'm using the mouse over on this side, and I'm doing even worse things to my shoulder.
Oh no.
Anyway, as we started to work with the rage that she was experiencing at work, she became aware of a kind of a habitual holding that had been going on there previously, before she even got the job working on the computer, that she had perhaps been holding this for 20 years or whatever, that it had something to do with something from her past, even though we didn't get into story.
Hmm.
And then one day, as we were working together and things were releasing, this incredible amount of grief came out.
Oh,
And this relationship between being hurt, feeling grief, covering it with anger, getting a job that reinforced this habitual pattern. It was this huge process of opening and letting go, and opening and letting go, that she was doing for herself. She wasn't being fixed. She wasn't given exercises. It was this process of awareness that changed what was happening. And I mean, I could go on and on with this story, but the end of the story is so funny because, then I didn't see her again. And I was like,
Oh, really?
I guess she
Wow.
wasn't, I guess whatever, she didn't call me back. And that's how clients come, clients go. And I was at a festival in our town, and this woman goes, Lavinia, Lavinia. And I looked, and it was that woman. And she drags her friend over and she goes, this is the woman who cured my shoulder.
Oh,
And I was like, I didn't cure your shoulder. You cured your shoulder. And she's like, right, right. I always forget that I did that. And it was just a beautiful moment of like feeling like, oh yeah.
story. It's a great story. I was really into that story. Kind of, kind of, I feel for that woman.
Oh no,
You
she
know,
was so happy, but it was just sort of like it just burst out of her, and I was like, I didn't cure anything, you did it yourself.
but
So,
having a facilitator is important. I mean, because
mhm,
a lot of us don't know how
mhm.
sometimes to do something on our own. That's what facilitators are for,
Right,
which
exactly.
healers are just facilitators. I mean,
Right. So to me, I'm just a teacher. I always just say I'm a teacher. So
teachers are vital. The world wouldn't operate without teachers. So
that's right. That's
it's a
right.
big job. It's an important job. Well, so you don't have to physically then come to Asheville, North Carolina to have, your Kaniza trainings. You said you tape them. Do you have like taped ones that you can download, or do you have like live classes online that people can follow? How do you operate?
I have all of the above. All of the above. I have individual lessons that are audio lessons that you can download. Um, Nothing's on tape anymore. It's all MP3s, but I also have full workshops that include video, but again, it's not video of me demonstrating. It's just that you can see me talking while I'm doing the talking.
Okay.
I also have several on-demand courses that were produced by the Shift Network that people
Oh,
can get. So there's like all kinds of ways. And then I have books because some people are not audio people. So I have different books that look at different ways. I have a book about fear. I have a book about body language. I have a book about the archetypes. And so people can dive into these different aspects of the work in order to be able to tune in. And all of my books actually also have links to audio recordings of the lessons that are in the books. So if you're an auditory learner, you can still learn from the visual of the book. So that was my approach to things. And I teach classes. I have an ongoing online class with people from around the world, which is really fun. And then I have
oh,
in-person classes here in Asheville. So there's no
wow.
excuse.
No, there isn't. There's any number of ways to have a session, which
That's right.
now I want to do because I have never done it before. So just from that little demonstration we did, it was huge. So I would love to try more of that. So but and I'm sorry I use the word taped. I mean, I'm, in my 60s, so I use archaic words that don't really have meaning anymore. I understand that it's MP3s, but so when somebody does download a lesson, it's they're not visually watching somebody do it. They're listening to you directing them how to move or what to do next, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And
Okay.
hopefully the instructions are clear enough. I very rarely get an email from somebody going, I didn't understand this part of the lesson. Every once in a while, and I'm always open to getting clearer and clearer in my own work, but most of the time people have no trouble at all understanding what to do.
Well, that's good. And then do you have these downloadable classes? Do they have like sections like this is for anger or this is for frozen shoulder, or are they just basically, you know,
The way I have it on the website is listing, it's kind of listed according to the body part that interests you. So shoulders,
Okay.
hips, back, things like that. And even that for me feels kind of weird, but I had to categorize it in some way
Yeah, I
because
suppose.
I can't say that and it's not that I'm even saying that this is the solution for your shoulder. It's just that this is the emphasis of the attention in this lesson is on the shoulders, or the emphasis of the attention on this is on your ankles, or whatever it is. And so sometimes people discover that they have anger in their ankles. I wouldn't say
Really?
I have a lesson for anger. Oh, you'd be surprised. I mean, if a person as a child was berated a lot and wanted to leave and couldn't leave because they had to stand there and listen to this parental figure, and what could they do? So then what happens? The ankles become super tight, the toes go up, the butt
Oh,
clenches, and then people develop that habit, and they're carrying that anger from their childhood in their ankles. I mean, it's there. We
that makes
somaticize all kinds of stuff.
that totally makes sense. I had an ankle replacement like 3 years ago. Maybe I had anger in my ankles.
Or
I
maybe,
mean, a lot of us has grown up with childhood trauma. I mean, that's
right.
just
And
something
it
that's
could have
common.
also, you might have had an accident that might have damaged your ankles. So that,
Well, I always had weak ankles. I was turning them all the time as a kid.
mhm.
They were just spindly and they would turn. And, you know, at one point, yeah, I had a dog. When my kids were little, we got a dog and it would pull me too hard when it walked in. The dog did pull me over once. And at that time, I had broken my ankle in two places and snapped a tendon, but I didn't know it. My
Right.
husband at the time was like, "Oh, it's just a sprain. You're such a baby. Why do you make such a big?" So I was like, "Oh, okay. I won't trust my own idea that it feels broken. He's probably right. I'm being a baby." So I hobbled around on this thing. By the time, a few decades later, he looked at it. The surgeon was like, how have you even been walking like a person? I mean, you had no tendons left. All the bones were slid to the side. My kids were making fun of me saying, "Oh, you were walking around on just like a skin bag full of loose bones." I'm like, thanks, kids. But it was bad and I let it go forever. And I just wonder, there's, stubbornness. Maybe I have stubbornness in my ankles.
Well, but there's also the whole emotion of not being validated by your partner, and of feeling like, your opinion is not valuable. I mean, that might
Well, I mean,
hurt the
we're
ankles too.
but I consider him a friend. I mean, he's family and I love him very much, but
Yeah.
we like each other a lot more that we don't have to be married to each other anymore.
All I'm saying is that, you embodied this feeling of I need to be what he is saying, instead of feeling your own
Well, yeah,
insecurity.
but I mean, there's always a whole host of issues, just learning to trust yourself and standing up for yourself. Those are all things I've learned since then. I was very young, when this
Right,
happened.
right,
So
right.
was what
So
it
that's the
was.
problem. I love that you said learning to stand up for yourself.
Well,
Speaking
there you go.
of,
There you Yeah, well, and now, yeah, now my ankle's good, so I can stand up for myself
excellent,
physically, emotionally.
excellent.
So, the time that this summit will air, probably I'm thinking now is going to be probably the first week in September. So, in September, October, November, do you have any like special things coming up that you want people to know about that I should include with links or anything?
Well, with links, the only thing that well, I guess so. I have two things, but one is in Pinehurst, North Carolina, where I'm doing a residency for a week there, and it's open to the public. And I can certainly provide you with the link for that. But of course, if you're not in Pinehurst, North Carolina, that's not going to do much for you. And
There
the other
might be people
one,
around who need that link,
but
so.
if there are people near Pinehurst, that, it would be a fun thing. And then the other thing that's happening is later in October, I'm going to be teaching a weekend workshop in Paris, which I don't know how much
Ooh.
of your audience is from Paris or Europe. But
Well,
it's going to
somebody
be,
might want to fly to Paris for that.
well,
Yeah.
it's just for a weekend. I purposely, for years I did these big retreats for a whole week, and people would come from different parts of the world. And I just wanted to make it something more local. So obviously, if you want to fly to Paris and spend the weekend with me, I would be more than happy. It's October 19th and 20th. But, or if you live in Europe and you want an excuse to come to Paris for the weekend, that would be the perfect excuse. So
Yeah.
I can certainly send you the links for both of those things. And if people are interested, but other than that, I'm mostly working online. My next online series is going to be going on while this summit is, but I continue to do the online series. So if people are interested, they can just sign up for my newsletter, and then they would get the announcements for that.
And when you do an online series, is it recorded so people can watch it?
Yes.
Okay.
There's nothing to
Good to-
watch. They'll listen.
I mean, to listen, sorry.
Yeah. No, that's
I'll
okay.
put that
It's
on your
people are
site
so
and
used to that. People are
yeah,
so used to thinking that they have to watch somebody and feel the
do it.
demonstration. And, but yes, I record it because, again, people are in many different time zones. So sometimes they can't show up live. So everyone
Right.
who signs up for the series gets a replay that's actually edited and cleaned up. So there's no extraneous chit chat or corrections or anything like that. They're just getting the pure lesson. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's great. Well, this has been really enlightening. I knew nothing about this, and I feel like I've got a good handle on what Kaniza is now, and I totally want to do it and try it. So thanks for spending this time, talking about that. I loved this.
It was so fun. You're a great host.
Well, you're a big guest. This was very fun for me. Anyway, thank you so much. And I hope anybody who wasn't familiar with this will, run to your website and take advantage of some of these recorded audios. But they can, try this practice. It sounds fascinating.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Isabel.
Thank you.